Good afternoon, Adam. Welcome to the show. How are you today?
Hello, James. I'm very well. Kind of warm. It's decided to be warm outside again. It stops raining, which is great.
Fantastic. Yeah, we've got sunny skies in Scarborough. It's always sunny in Scarborough, even when it isn't.
Cool.
Um, Scarbados, they call it.
Scarpe.
So, welcome to the show. I'm really excited to have you. Just to explain to the listeners and to you, actually, Adam, I got given one of your books for my birthday last year,
Ooh.
and it was beautiful. I'm going to hold it up for people watching, and for those that aren't, it's the book on UFOs. Immediately stands out with the cover. It's got a very kind of American scene with in your very unique style, and it's got a UFO beaming up a deer,
Mm.
and it's got that kind of retro feel, and it's just a beautiful standout book. And I dived into it, really enjoyed it, found it fascinating, really engaging, and a piece of art. So I then bought the other book, which is on ghosts,
Yep.
um, my specialist subject, equally
Uh-huh.
beautiful. And then you've got a new one out as well. So do you want to tell everyone? We'll start off with the new book. How's that going?
Yeah, that's right. The new book is an illustrated history of urban legends. The series has sort of developed over the years. I started off with a book called An Illustrated History of Filmmaking, and I've taken a sort of a left turn directly into the occult somehow.
Yeah. How did that happen? So let's go kind of right to the beginning. So let's go to
Oh, yeah.
little Adam. So first of all, how did you find out that you were interested in like art and illustration? How did you get kind of into filmmaking and not filmmaking but films and the
Yeah.
paranormal and getting into to kind of doing books? Let's go right to the beginning.
Well, I suppose I come from quite a creative family. Everyone in my immediate family has a creative job or a hobby. So my sister's a florist, my brother's been a web and app developer, but he likes to do a lot of proper photography with a proper camera.
Nice,
Um, and my mum was an art teacher. She's retired, and my dad is a fine artist and poet in his spare
fantastic.
time. So I got dragged around a lot of art galleries as a kid, but I enjoyed it. But as well as that, we would go to any particular monolith, standing stone, stone circle, anything that was en route. Or we would specifically have holidays where we'd go somewhere where we knew there were a lot of them.
Yeah,
Uh, I have very fond memories of going to Aberdeenshire, where there's quite a lot. And that was entirely because we used to have this book, which was a big map guide to where monoliths and stone circles were. And we just noticed there was a big cluster in Aberdeenshire. So we drove up there, took about 8 hours, I'd say,
yeah,
but great. And then after school, I did a foundation at Leeds College of Art, which is about 9 months. And then I did a BA in illustration, did a degree. And about halfway through my degree, I started doing briefs for clients. And those first briefs were for museums, a museum design agency. So I was doing kind of panel illustrations and kind of decorative panels that gave a bit of flavor or illumination to text.
mm,
And pretty much after I graduated, I did my illustrated history of filmmaking book. The publisher had seen my illustrations of the Hyde Park Picture House, which is an old independent cinema in Leeds, may or may not be haunted.
right.
The manager told me it isn't.
They
But
normally do.
others have said it definitely is.
Yeah, I think that's the manager's job is to say things aren't haunted, and for the
I
staff to
do
say that they feel them.
remember going into their basement before they had a redevelopment, and the basement was very odd. Lots of strange artifacts down there. And if you went down there with the right kind of uh, mindset, you would probably think it was haunted.
Yeah, just had that
Anyway,
feeling.
yeah. I was commissioned to do a illustrated history of filmmaking. They had a writer on board, and then they dropped out, so I ended up writing it. And because of the success of that book, they asked if I wanted to do anything else, if I knew anything else in my brain, if I had any more information in there. And yes, I was a big fan of UFOs and ghosts. So I started easy with UFOs. I grew up watching The X-Files, and classic stuff from the 60s and 70s, like Quatermass and the Pit, The Stone Tape, um, and a lot of B movies as well. Um,
Yeah.
and I used to read, well, anything I could get my hands on from charity shops, secondhand bookshops. I think you tend to find a lot of English, lots of bookshops around the UK have quite a healthy occult or esoteric section, I find.
Yes.
I
That's
don't
one
know
of
if
my
you find that as
hobbies.
well.
Yeah, I've just got a whole this week of just I do that. I go and find paranormal, especially local stories as well. Like go into an area, digging through the charity shops, and yeah, building my Fortean library. I've got quite a
Yeah.
few treats in there. You sometimes get an absolute bargain as well.
Oh yeah.
You find something for £1 and then look online and people send it for like 200. So
Something that's really rare or self-published and
mm,
really small circulation. Those are the ones to really look out for, and you hardly ever find them online.
yeah, yeah, absolutely love that. Yeah. And funny you're talking about monoliths as well. Like we just this morning organizing a trip to see a monolith where we've had some paranormal activity. So yeah,
Oh,
bit of serendipity there.
what kind of activity?
So there's this place called the Rudston Monolith, and it's actually the tallest standing monolith in the country. And
Mhm.
we were doing an investigation there, and kind of nothing happened all night. I had a documentary maker with me over
Yeah.
from Finland, and yeah, nothing happened, and we were a bit disappointed. But when we got back to the car, the every single window in the car was down, and it was unlocked. And I kind of put this out there because the car was quite close. It was dark. It's in a very quiet
Mm.
place where you could
Yep.
hear even footsteps. We didn't hear the car unlock. We didn't hear the door open and close. We didn't hear the windows wind down.
Yep.
The key has to be in the car to even turn the engine on for the electrics. I even demonstrated on camera standing just outside with it touching the car. It still wouldn't turn on.
Mm.
The only logical explanation is someone crept up to me and the filmmaker without being seen, pickpocketed me, went back to the car, got in the car without hearing or hearing it unlock, um, and then put the windows down without hearing. All of us noticing the light suddenly come on in this dark area, and then gave me the keys back in my pocket. I did put it out there and said, to the skeptics, please try and debunk this. There was two explanations. One is some models of car, you hold the buttons down and it activates that. That still
Mm.
wouldn't account for not hearing the noise. And I even checked with Ford and my model doesn't do that. The other one was the batteries are going. So I got my battery checked. This was a couple of years ago. The battery's still working. There was nothing wrong.
Mm.
So yeah, an interesting little place where people go and put offerings and all sorts.
Mm. Yeah, the Fox Mulder opinion might be that it's some kind of trickster like entity or the Fae or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Any history of this particular monolith having anomalous experiences associated with it?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of folklore. So the folklore is that the though it doesn't make sense because obviously the church was built a long time after the monolith, but
Yeah.
the devil was angry and threw this rock at the church and just missed, so it's stuck in the ground.
Right. Not unlike, or maybe I'm thinking of the same one. There's the Devil's Arrows, which are, I think, in North Yorkshire.
Right.
A very similar folklore where the devil threw these stones at a church, but they fell short. They're about three very tall
Oh, I don't know that one. I'm gonna
stones.
have to visit there though. I'm gonna have to note that one
Yeah, I
down.
forget the name of the North Yorkshire town it is, but they're kind of separated by a road. It's quite
Right.
amusing when you find them like that.
Yeah.
So one's by itself on one side of the road, and then there's two others in a field. I'm
Right.
pretty sure they're called the Devil's Arrows. I went about a year ago.
I'm gonna have to have a look at that. Yeah, and there's like strange lights and poltergeist activity. And of course, it's the area where the this interdimensional werewolf called Old Stinker's meant to be that Paul Sinclair does a lot of research on. So and the Walden Newton Triangle as well, that area in North Yorkshire that has this like incredible amount of activity that's unexplained. That's kind of like classed as one of the tips of this area. So
Hmm.
yeah, and there's
What was the name
also
of the triangle?
the Walden Newton Triangle, it's
Okay.
called. And there's a, kind of like a line from the monolith along that they found a load of burial grounds from the
Mm,
Ice Age as well. So there's something ley line or something about it. So yeah, it's an interesting place. Definitely worth a visit.
okay, I'll add it to the list.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So yeah, the film book was well received, and then you did the one on UFOs. And what I really like about your book and books is the fact that it provides everyone's view. So it goes into a history of UFOs, but it also provides a skeptical response
Yeah.
and all the other ideas. It's a completely non-judgmental book. It's very factual based. Um, and just the pictures are so gorgeous. They're done in this, and I don't mean this to sound offensive because it isn't. It takes some real skill to do it in a simplistic, kind of stylized way
Mm.
that immediately you look at it, and for my neurodiverse eyes as well, straight away everything jumps out at me. They're just really beautifully presented. How did you kind of begin going into doing it chronologically in terms of that research, but also providing all those different ideas?
I think I began that book as I did with the others. Why I would just begin with a big pile of books. I've got an ever-growing library of reference materials, and I'd just make notes. I'd read through books. I'd watch films. I'd watch TV, make notes, and then I would attempt to assemble it into a coherent timeline, and then I'd figure out where the gaps were. Trying to have a more international look over the phenomena. Um, a lot of the time, UFO books will skew towards the US, and it probably still does that in some ways, but
Mm.
because there's so much of the phenomena is reported and historically was reported in the US under that phrase UFO or
Yeah,
flying saucer, because that's where that terminology came from. Um, but yeah, plugging those gaps, and a lot of the time, my editorial decisions were influenced by what I thought would be interesting to draw, and trying to have a diverse range of things to draw rather than the same image of a UFO over a field, 10
yeah,
times.
yeah,
An example would be there's one about a USO, is that correct?
yes,
Unidentified submerged object
yeah,
seen by a ship at sea, which was a large red sphere. And I just thought that was a great image that I
yeah.
wanted to put in there that's somewhat unique. Um, yeah, so the books were kind of arranged by what I had read, what I'd watched, and then influenced by what I thought would be visually interesting. And I'm a big fan of useless trivia, so a lot of that gets in there.
It's wonderful, and I think I was surprised as well. There were some really lesser known things in there, including one of my all-time favorites that happened here in Scarborough
Yep.
with someone with the pseudonym of Adele who got a visitor from a man in black and the
Yep.
with the clock. I've for years I've been trying to track whoever Adele is and never managed to track her down.
Yes, yes. I remember trying to find like a second source for that one, and it just couldn't find it. So it did remind me of some of the classic Men in Black stories where it's an anonymous person, so you wonder if the author just made it up.
Yeah, yeah,
Um, but yeah, that's quite common with the Men in Black stories, it seems like. But I like that Men in Black stories were just so deviate from what you're familiar with from the movies. And,
yes,
um, they're not always a man in black either. Sometimes they're women, or they present as women, or they're not wearing black at all. They're wearing a beige trench coat, or it's usually they are distinguished by odd behavior and saying strange things.
Yeah.
And I think it talks about in the book that there's this skeptic perspective that a lot of these early Men in Black stories were inspired by people being visited by ufologists who were
Yeah.
interested in gathering witness statements.
Yeah.
And these ufologists would show up and throw lots of strange terminology at them and ask them odd questions, and that would become the legend itself.
Yeah. Yeah. And it would make sense. And many of us are odd. I
Yes.
suppose people listening to this will probably agree that we are a little bit odd in a very fantastic way.
Mhm.
How did you choose not to put stuff in? Because there must be so much that you wanted to.
Yeah, there was a lot of cut content, and the books are collaborative in that there's the publisher. So the first few books were published by No Brow, and there's an in-house editor, an in-house designer, and they provide feedback throughout the project. And they've worked on a lot of graphic novels and nonfiction and children's books, and they'll provide feedback based on what they think might be more interesting than something else. So a lot of the time, the decision is a collaborative one. So I'll have a little help in that area. Um, yeah, I guess it's as simple as that. And I do feel bad about the things that get cut out, but then I think maybe I'll revisit it someday
Yeah.
and squeeze it into another book, which has happened. Yeah.
Yeah. The nerd in me is desperately thinking of all the things that might have gone that I would have loved to read.
Mm.
Um, but no, it makes sense. And I suppose they're the experts in what keeps people connected and coming back for more. I always overwrite whenever I do submissions to the point I've sometimes had like 3 sides removed, but it's quite wounding sometimes, isn't it?
Mm.
And so how well was it received, the UFO book compared to like the film book?
I think they both. I think it was just as each book has come out, they've just had more and more uh, eyeballs on them. Let's say
Yeah, yeah,
each new book has done well, and I've just been really pleased with the feedback. People writing to me, or otherwise sending me a picture of it in an obscure bookshop.
yeah.
All the time in another country, in another language, which is always exciting.
That's lovely. Yeah, it's a lot of people on listen to the show as well from all over the world. And we
Mm.
even had our first Nepalese listeners the other day, so
Ooh.
that's really cool. And so was the ghost one the next one in the series?
That's right, yeah. After the UFO book, I thought I'd have to do ghosts. It seems like the other side of the coin, or another part of the spectrum,
Yeah,
depending on your perspective. There's like the Jacques Vallée or the John Keel perspectives of the supernatural, in that it's essentially all the same thing, seen through a different lens.
yeah,
But yeah, I did ghosts, and the research was very uh, similar process. Most of that was done during lockdown, so sadly I couldn't do any first in-person research. I couldn't go to certain haunted castles and haunted locations that I wanted to.
yeah.
Uh, but oddly enough, and I didn't learn this until late in the research, that my house that I was living in at the time was opposite an old magic shop,
Right.
which burned down mysteriously in the 90s.
Oh wow. There's a whole
Um,
legend there.
yes, exactly. And
Yeah.
that ended up making it into the urban legends book.
Right. No, that's wonderful. And have you been to any of the places since you wrote the book? Has anything kind of really drawn you that you wanted to investigate?
I think I'm saving it up for a good road trip one day. I'd like to go back to Totnes Castle in Devon,
Mm,
which I went to once. I remember reading about it in a book about ghosts, and the book was completely wrong. It said it was in Scotland, but it's in Devon. Um,
yeah.
Sometimes I find these odd mistakes.
Yeah.
And yeah, I had an odd feeling that one.
Right.
So I'd like to go back. But yeah, I'd like to have a nice road trip at some point and go look at all these places. If I do another book in this series, I'll put that at the beginning of the project. I'll do some research in person and go to some places, as well as reading all the books and
Yeah.
watching films.
That sounds like a good Netflix documentary as well, to be honest.
Yeah.
Adam visits the locations in his book and sees if anything happens.
Mm.
Sounds good. Yeah, I've just been doing a lot of research on local ghost stories in Scarborough. So I've been spending all my mornings in the library on a weekend, and it was interesting to find that our most famous ghost story, the person who it's based on, they got the name wrong, they got the place
Ah,
where she died wrong, all these things in the story as it's kind of grown throughout the century. It's completely changed from what the actual incident was, which is, yeah, that's really given me a big awakening. And some of them I've found no, but like you were saying, no other sources other than one person once wrote a letter into the paper, and
that's
then
right.
that's where it's come from, and they could have completely made it up. But then do
Yeah.
these things become a reality? Who knows?
Yes, yes. Well, there's the whole thing I discussed in Urban Legends in some way, how stories that were explicitly fiction, or at least the author believed it to be explicitly fiction, would then be interpreted as truth by other people. I guess Slender Man is the most one of the
Yeah,
more famous examples. And then going back to the Orson Welles radio production of
that's right.
The War of the Worlds, and I think a lot of the hysteria was exaggerated in America, but people did believe it was real, or they were afraid, or they panicked,
Yeah,
but maybe not as badly as it's remembered.
yeah,
Um,
yeah. I remember reading about that in my UFO book at primary school.
hmm,
The radio broadcast, and then people thinking it was real. And of course, there's the tulpa thing, where
yep,
people, and my most favorite example, and I think it was the singer of the Damned, and someone told me this, where um, for years there was a newspaper report that a vampire ran out from this churchyard in front of this car and disappeared,
yep,
and then years after people started actually seeing a vampire in the churchyard. And then the singer of the Damned said, well, the first one was me. I was drunk and kind of fell in
yeah.
front of this car and I disappeared because I tripped and fell into a hedge or something like that. But then because people started believing it, they started seeing it. Well, whether it was pareidolia or they actually, it created a reality, I don't know. But I
Or
love
even a
those
time
stories.
slip.
Yeah, yeah,
Maybe it was a
repeating.
literal time slip
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
because he tripped over.
yeah. I like that. Um, yeah, it's fascinating. But the Slender Man, where people genuinely believe they've seen him, and it was creepy pasta, wasn't it?
Yep. It could have originated on 4chan, like a lot of them did. And there were other similar ones like the Rake and well, yeah, stuff like that. There was the Momo face. That was a
That's
couple of
right.
years ago. That was big on, was it TikTok?
Yeah,
It
it
was
created
on
like
social media.
a bit of a moral panic, that one, didn't it?
Yes.
I remember it. Even I worked for the youth service, and it started coming in there about Momo and people being scared, and we should look out for it and all this. So
What's it
you,
gonna do?
I know.
Yeah, that's an old internet thing is the concept of sometimes you call it a mimetic hazard. Like the idea that there's an image so frightening on the internet that it'll immediately kill you, you know.
Yeah, yeah. That's why my face isn't on there a lot because that might do that. Um, And there was that Charlie one as well. I don't even remember that. That was around about the same time of a game called Charlie. And if you
Uh, was it
played
like a
it,
big toy thing?
no, it was like I think it was a pen in a piece of paper that was a square. I could be
Right.
getting this wrong, but it was like had numbers on it, and it was almost like fortune telling. And if you did it
Hmm.
at 3 in the morning, then like poltergeist activity would occur and people fleeing the houses, and that
Yeah.
became a big thing for a while.
Yeah, there's a lot of similar rituals. There was the Midnight Man, variations of that where you do a specific action at midnight or 2 a.m. is common, where you're alone in a house lit only by candles. You knock on a door, or you create an object like you hollow out a baby doll and fill it with something weird like rice. There's a lot of those, and it's kind of similar to Bloody Mary as a
Mm,
ritual in order to see something.
yeah,
And then it goes back to, I guess, spirit boards as well, and
yeah,
uh, Ouija
yeah,
and seances. It's the idea of you're going into a dark room and you point yourself in a certain mindset to encourage belief, I suppose.
yeah. It's stimulating consent, isn't it, to open up a doorway? It's
Yeah.
like, yeah. We had one in our village where it was the church, and if you walked backwards 3 times at midnight, the devil was meant to appear.
Ooh,
I did try it once, and I remember on the last time round, I was like, should I be doing this? But yeah, he didn't turn up.
yeah, that's like a rule of three thing.
Yeah,
Three's come up a lot in rituals and magic. But I like it when there's a specific locale like that. They call it legend tripping.
right.
So a lot of towns will, maybe listeners will be aware of one from their own town where there's like a house or a thing that people will tell stories about, and they'll dare each other to go visit it or perform an action there.
Yeah.
It's like the one you described.
Yeah, we had a post actually as well in Brompton my Sword, and there was this buried village next
Hmm.
to this pond. So the village had been abandoned, but it was you could still kind of see it under the ground with the ridges of the hill.
Yeah.
And there was this one random post in the middle, just a wooden post. And when we first moved there, all the kids said, "Whatever you do, just don't break the shadow, because if you do, all the
Mm,
ghosts of the village come up." But the post's gone now, so someone did once. Don't know whether they're still there.
I like that one. That's a good
Yeah.
one.
Yeah, it's I'd never heard it before. The church one I've heard other variations, but that one is quite specific to that spot.
Mm.
How so your the urban legend one's out. I haven't got that one yet. How's that gone, and how did the research for that go, and what did you kind of like choose to go in and choose to miss out?
Um, yeah, Urban Legends felt like a good third book. I wanted to avoid doing one solely on cryptids or monsters because then I felt like I would be completely ripping off the 1970s Usborne series called World of the Unknown. And they did a kind of a trilogy on UFOs, ghosts, and monsters. So I wanted to avoid doing that. It was never my intention to completely copy that concept. Though obviously it was an inspiration. I read those books; they were in
Yeah,
our school library.
yeah, me
And I
too.
always saw it as going beyond three books. You could do all sorts of areas of the paranormal. The fae, magic, um, magical places. And maybe there are of those Bond books I'm forgetting. I think they did one on witchcraft as well, actually.
Did they?
Um, yeah, so urban legends, it's quite a loose term. Originally, when it was thought up in the 50s, I want to say, um, it was meant to describe folklore in like the modern city, shared by local modern people. But really, the distinction is quite blurry. A lot of urban legends, when you trace them back, they are folklore,
Yeah,
and sometimes they come from myths even. There is a sort of a distinction in that myths are usually tied to a belief system, while folklore usually begins as a story that is told but might not necessarily be true. Um, I guess the most famous example of an urban legend would be the alligators or crocodiles in the New York sewers went around for a long time, and probably still does show up from time to time now. And then there's quite gruesome ones like the dog in the microwave. I remember people telling me about that one as though it was
oh
true.
yeah, yeah. I told someone that story the other day. The old lady with the poodle
Yeah,
who tries to dry it because it was out and mistakenly blew it up.
That's right. Sometimes it's a poodle, sometimes it's a cat,
Right.
sometimes it's a different breed of dog, but it's usually an old elderly woman who's confused about new
Yeah.
technology, you know. Um, but when you trace that one back, it has a lot of similarities to a much older folklore about children in ovens, you know, and
Right.
then almost relates thematically to Hansel and Gretel, you know.
Yeah.
So you kind of get these archetypical setups, and then they kind of change to suit the times, you know.
Yeah. I wonder if Trump's "they're eating cats and dogs" one came from something like that. That's
Well,
become its
yeah,
own
sadly,
urban legend.
a lot of urban legends are used um, to create suspicion about groups of people.
Mm.
Sometimes they're, well, blatantly racist.
Yeah.
You'll have different variations of the same urban legend where the villain of the story is a different minority, depending on
Yeah.
the time. Um, yeah, it's interesting. I tried to address that a few times in the book.
Yeah. A lot of the conspiracies as well go back to like like middle, even the COVID ones, you could trace them back to um, the Middle Ages,
Yeah.
anti-Semitic kind of tropes that were then continued throughout kind of history and just, like you said, change with whatever's going on at the time.
Yeah. Yeah, similar to how the satanic panic
Mm,
has various relations to the same thing, the anti-Semitic tropes of like suspicions of groups of people or minorities doing strange rituals,
mm,
and usually involves the blood of innocent children, and that kind of thing.
yeah.
Uh, the Romans thought that about the Christians allegedly as well.
Yeah, they used to
They
persecute the
misunderstood
Christians, I think.
the Eucharist. Is that what it's called?
Yeah,
The drinking of the wine.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um, Allegedly, Romans believed they were literally drinking
The blood of Christ,
or
vampirically.
the blood of their victims, perhaps.
Yeah, yeah. There's I was lecturing with someone who was actually talking about the traces of the idea of the vampire in the Christian Bible and where it all came from. It was
Hmm.
really fascinating. I'm gonna have to get her on the show one day to talk more about it.
Right.
But yeah, so Emma, she's called. She's yeah, really interesting.
Hmm.
What about I don't know if you cover it in the book, but where there's some kind of like urban legend that then, because it's spoken about, actually becomes a reality in terms of, say for example, the Satanic Panic, there were like groups formed thinking it had been a trend and were actually doing things. Have you got any of
Yeah,
those?
there's a name for it. No, there's a technical term for it. If I can find it really quickly by flicking through my book. Maybe it's later in the book. There's a particular example, which is the German city of Bielefeld or Bielefeld. I think that's how you pronounce it. There was a sort of joke in the 90s that this city didn't exist.
Right.
And then there were people who would believe this story. Um, and there's a name for it when people interpret these made up stories as true. And I wish I'd just written it down beforehand.
Is it a German name?
No, it's maybe I can find it in my text.
I do love the Germans have some wonderful names for things that we don't. I suppose Wanderlust is the most famous, but
Oh,
they've got
right. And
the
Zeitgeist.
Zeitgeist, yeah. And there's one of my favorite that I can never remember, but it's a term for wandering alone in the woods naked. And it's just one word to describe that.
Right. Um, just strange behavior. Um, it's the same word that you'd use. Um, no, it's no good. I'm never going to find it. But it's the same word. Uh, like when you want to get some scissors, or you're asking someone for scissors, and you mime scissors.
Right.
It's the same word for that. Uh,
Okay. It'll come
well,
to you. I'm
it
sure it
won't.
will.
It's an obscure word that I've never heard before.
We'll have to
But
look it up.
yeah, there's this idea that when people repeat these things, people will change their behavior because of it.
Yeah, I imagine, again, just because it's the most recent one that after Trump said that about people were probably more likely to not leave the dogs out in the garden, for example, as a real obvious one, because there'll be some people that believe it will be true.
Ostension.
Ostension,
Yeah. Ostension is a message sent through the miming of actions, such as pointing to mean that way.
right?
Folklorists use the term to describe how people change their behavior because of urban legends, from avoiding a house because it's said to be haunted to the extremes of mass hysteria.
Yeah,
So there you go. I
ostension. I
would
have to
never have
remember that.
remembered that word. Ostension.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I need to remember that myself.
Yeah, it was one of the terms I found out through research. Ostension and legend tripping I liked, which is what we discussed earlier. Specifically, I guess it's a form of ostension. Specifically, going somewhere because it's said to be associated with a thing,
Yeah,
like the Devil's Seat or Devil's Bench in America, where people will leave a beer and
right,
it's said to be drunk if they
right,
leave
okay.
because the devil or a ghost drinks it, you know.
Or someone that is that people leave beer there and they get a free drink.
Yes. That's like a Scooby-Doo villain
Yeah,
plot, isn't it? Like
yeah.
creating a myth in order to profit from it.
Tell you what, guys, if you leave a beer there, right, I come back like in a week, it'll be drank. I promise you. Yeah, I might start that legend on my street, right outside my door, and
Yeah.
see what happens. That's a really good
Um,
one.
Another extreme example would be in the 19th century, late 19th century Australia. You would have armed thieves and just, I guess, trickster type people dressing up as ghosts, specifically to rob people because they were frightening. It happened in America as well. And some would say the famous Spring Heel Jack is another example. Someone
Mhm.
deliberately going through this whole pantomime of dressing up as a frightful ghost or monstrous person to extend their legend, you know. And
Yeah.
it got quite out of hand in Australia, and you'd have like roaming gangs trying to find these people dressed up as ghosts, beating them up, or trying to kill them.
Did you hear the Hammersmith Spectre story?
It rings a bell.
So there was a idea that there was this ghost grabbing people, and
Yep,
in the cemetery in Hammersmith,
yep,
and it became a point where people were trying to find this spectre.
yep.
And this guy came out, and this other man who was out looking for the spectre shot him, and he was a painter in painting
Mm,
clothes. And
yep,
it went to court, and he was one of the only people that it was where belief came into it, and the judge said he genuinely believed that it was a spectre, so
yep.
therefore it can't be murder.
So what did he expect to happen when he shot a ghost, though?
Well, exactly. I don't know. It's
Are ghosts impervious to bullets, or do you have to shoot them with a ghost bullet?
yeah, I don't know. It's a I'd love to read the actual if it's written down the actual report from the court. It's such a fascinating story.
Yeah, I managed to squeeze in the similar mass hysteria about the Highgate Cemetery into the book about ghosts, which I
Yeah,
did visit. That was one of the places I really wanted to visit during
yeah,
lockdown because I wanted to draw it from a specific angle and I couldn't go to do it. And I used just a mixture of tour videos and drone footage and Google Maps and Bing Maps because
yeah,
Bing Maps used to let you look at an overview of a place from a very odd angle that you don't see on Google Maps. So that was
right.
really cool. And then I eventually did go visit it this year. And yeah, the mass hysteria in Highgate was the 70s, and allegedly there was vampire or magic activity going on there. And it just got out of hand, and there was huge mobs showed up to find this vampire, and someone's tomb was desecrated. Like if I remember correctly, the head was removed from this unsuspecting corpse, you know.
Yeah.
So yeah, I guess that's another example of real extreme ostension, a legend prompting people to do something that they wouldn't usually do.
Yeah. And you can imagine how it works as well, because if you hear there's some, especially in the 70s and well, 80s even more, there's a vampire, then someone who's maybe a goth goes, oh, I'll go and check that out. And then
Yeah.
someone else comes in and goes, there it is. It really is a vampire.
Yep.
And so it grows. And then they'll run, but they flew or something like that. You know, it'll just get exaggerated as the story goes on. I think one of my other favorite ones is the bottom stabber. There's a in London again around the time of Spring Heel Jack. There was a gentleman that used to be very well dressed, but would
Mhm.
just stab women with a fork in the buttocks and run off. And that was another one that potentially led to people actually doing it in real. And they thought the first one could have been fake.
Yeah.
I love these stories.
Mm.
What's
Yeah.
which oh you've got Mothman on the front as well, an incredible
Yes.
picture of Mothman. I imagine that's gonna create many tattoos around the
I
world
hope so.
once it's seen.
Yeah, I know of someone who got a tattoo based on the UFO cover, so that was quite fun.
That's amazing. They are
Um,
so visual. They're so stunning, the pictures. How do you how did you develop your style? How did you kind of go about it?
I guess because I have a background in the museum design stuff, and as a kid, I was a big fan of Tintin by Hergé, the Belgian artist, and he comes from a an era of uh, Belgian and European art that there was this movement called ligne claire, if you want to call it a movement. It was a sort of a style, an aesthetic.
Yeah,
And I've always loved that kind of aesthetic, a clean line, bold colors, very um, minimal palette. I've always just found it to be the best for me.
yeah.
Uh, I like to be direct and as clear as possible. And earlier, I think you said you liked my work because it was simplistic. Well, that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to make it simple and direct, and um, it's something I don't see too often in occult related illustration. Um, so I felt like I had a unique uh, take on the subject by
Definitely.
making it clear, really boiling down the details, like the text, because there's so much of the pages are given over to the diagrams and illustrations. The text is usually, a paragraph or so for each topic. So I really have to slim down what I want to say. So I feel like with the text and the images both being very, at least I've tried to make them as concise as possible. They complement each other in that way.
Definitely, it's so easy to pick up and read, and then because it's so concise, the stuff stays in your mind as well. Um, and it's kind of it's almost like products as well. I don't know much about graphic design and things, so I don't know like the terminology, but the you could imagine it being a brand, each image as well. You know, similar to it's what we as a paranormal investigation team, myself and Matt, we're very different, and I think like you were saying, it stands out. I mean, that's our logo. It's we're not we don't wear black. We actually wear really colourful, bright, colourful clothing and stuff. Not on
Yeah,
purpose. That's just who we are, and I think that's made us stand out. And I think it's exactly the same with your work. It really is. It's bright. It's colourful. It brings joy. Each page has got a real joyful feel to it, even when
mm.
it is something quite dark. Is
Thank
that something
you.
you're going for?
Yes. Oh, I don't want to frighten children too much.
Yeah,
At least the editor will try and remind me not to make it too scary.
yeah,
With the Urban Legends book, which is under the Flying Eye branch of the publishers, there were a few things I toned down, but I didn't feel too bad about toning it down, um, because it's been obvious with the last few books that lots of kids like them, because it's straightforward, clear,
yeah.
lays everything out. And yeah, I don't feel like I have to talk down to children either, because I was reading similar books as a kid. I was reading Strange but True, and the Usborne, World of the Unknown, that kind
Yeah.
of stuff.
I think we've had a similar library growing up.
Yeah.
Um, that was actually going to be one of my questions to you was they are so it doesn't matter what age you are, these are accessible. So someone who, is my age can pick it up and really delve in and get a lot out of it. And, a child can as well. And whether that was actually you were purposely trying to do that and how difficult did you find that?
Yeah, it was a lot of urban legends are quite explicit.
Mm,
So there was a lot more I had to leave out. But then I guess the same goes for UFOs and ghosts. There's certain things that have a very um there's a lot of adult content that I probably wouldn't want to put in a children's book.
yeah.
Um, but the books I think suitable for young people and adults. I don't think it's dumbed down.
No, it definitely isn't.
But there's just certain things I chose not to put in there.
Yeah.
There's a lot of urban legends about sexcapades and really gruesome, brutal murder and accidents. A lot of urban legends function like like jokes. So there's a setup and a punchline,
Yeah.
usually quite really dark humor, like the dog in the microwave,
Yeah.
or something you would see in a Buster Keaton movie, like someone on a work site with a complex amount of pulleys and levers and a barrel full of bricks, and they accidentally do something and they're launched in the air, Looney Tunes physics.
Yeah.
A lot of urban legends are kind of like that.
Did you notice any difference kind of in terms of cultural with urban legends, if there was any patterns, for example, in Japanese culture, which we seem to read a lot about over here compared to, say, European folklore and legends.
A lot of the time you see surprising commonalities.
Right. Okay.
So when you boil down the story, it's essentially the same. I guess you could look at it from the Joe Campbell perspective, the hero of a thousand faces, and that there's these certain archetypes, like all stories, fit a certain
Mm,
structure, or they have the same kind of themes, same kind of characters, like a bogeyman who parents will tell their children about to make sure they go to bed. You know, over here we have, well, I guess the bogeyman is sort of a generic term, but there's also specifically the bogeyman.
yeah.
Um, and then I guess in the book about Japanese urban legends I read, it really mixed up the supernatural or the paranormal, if you prefer, with um, like prosaic urban legends about mistakes and accidents, etc.
Yeah.
And a lot of the books about Western urban legends, they would really separate them or they'd completely exclude the paranormal as
Right.
though it's a different thing.
Okay.
But in my broad interpretation of urban legends, it's more about the structure and the themes, let's say, and then whether it's paranormal or not doesn't matter too much. Anyway, that's my broad interpretation of the subject. I guess the differences would be between cultures would be the way the story's dressed up.
Yeah.
Um, so particular things that would be familiar to the audience in that country.
And do you think there are any lessons within it? Like what are they trying to tell people in these retellings?
Kind of similar with ghost stories. A lot of them are parabolic. Is that a word? Um, and sometimes not in a good way. Like in ghost stories, there's quite a few ghost stories about the White Lady.
Yeah.
There's a lot of different white ladies, and this is found all over the world. A lot of the time, the story would be about a woman who's died, and there's some kind of criticism of how she behaved, and that's
Yeah.
why she's a ghost.
Yeah.
She failed her husband in some way, or she failed her children in some way, and that's why she haunts the lake.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's pushing a message on the audience.
Yeah.
And urban legends can be that way. There's suspicion of new technology. There's the phantom photocopier in Japan, um, which I only found one source for, so it's possibly made up by a horror writer,
Right.
on the internet. Um, this is a more modern one. That's usually my suspicion. But that one's about someone, a legendary photocopier in a corner shop. And if you scan your face in it, it'll print out a picture of your face on the day you die.
Right. I like
And
that.
in the story, a man uses the photocopier, it prints out his face as it is now, and is disappointed because obviously it doesn't work. And then he walks into the street, is immediately hit by a truck,
Right.
So it's like a joke. It's got a ridiculous, dark humor punchline.
Yeah.
Um, but then that links to, suspicions about technology. You have the rattle and the Cadillac. You have, well, the various legends that came out of Y2K,
Oh yeah, yeah.
the mass panic. Well, it wasn't really a mass panic, but it was a panic, a phenomena
Yeah.
in the 1999 to 2000. Um, you have they're all linked often by, I guess, authors will try and categorize them this way, but you do find that there's links and that there's stories about animals having horrible ends, or there's stories about animals showing up in unexpected places, like the alligator in the sewers, or the rat in the Coca-Cola, or KFC rats, Kentucky
Yeah.
Fried Rat kind of thing, which shows up to this day
Yeah.
and might happen, but a lot of the time when it's reported to have happened, it's made up because, there'll be a grainy or a pixelated picture of a deep fried something that's vaguely in the shape of a rat. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we hear it. Like I've had friends where I've gone, "Oh, that'd be funny if that happened," and then someone said that happened, and you could see how it kind of works, and then as it's retold, and there's some people that are gifted storytellers, isn't there, who had
Yes.
embellish it, but to make it more interesting, and so they grow. And now it's surprising actually with the birth of the internet that we haven't seen them even more common, more frequent.
I think you just have to know where to look
Right.
because
Okay.
Snopes will track these down, the website Snopes,
Right.
and
I've not heard of that.
they'll say whether it's true or false. I guess we just know it by other names like clickbait.
Yeah.
It functions the same way. It leads you to expect a story is true, and then when you actually get onto the thing, it will be false, or it will be spread around in such a way, like what you said about Trump earlier, spreading that sort of urban legend around. Fake news would be another term. But
Yeah. Yeah. Maybe actually it happens so often that they don't catch on because there's immediately another one.
yes,
I suppose if you
or
look
it's
at Twitter,
constantly
Twitter,
evolving faster than you have time to, think about it critically.
yeah, yeah, that's really interesting. What out of each book, what's your favorite? So what's your favorite UFO story? What's your favorite ghost story? And what's your favorite urban legend?
Okay, so in Illustrated History of UFOs, I was quite fond of the Rendlesham incident
Yeah, I know that one.
down south from me geographically, which is where a UFO allegedly showed up on a US Air Force base in Rendlesham Forest. And what I most enjoyed about that is that they recorded some of it on tape. So there's an audio tape of these American, I guess, are they soldiers if they're working on our Air Force base? Well, US military guys
Yeah,
running around the woods in a panic, chasing a light in the woods. And I love that tape. It's its own podcast,
yeah, yeah,
It's what fictional horror podcasts are trying to achieve,
yeah,
If you listen to anything like that, like the Lovecraft investigations on BBC Radio 4, and the Magnus Archives, and the White Vault, stuff like that, it's aspiring to be just as good as that. I love
yeah.
that. Um, and in the ghosts book, um, I like the stories about haunted objects. They're quite hard to track down. Haunted objects as opposed to cursed objects.
Yeah.
Um, there was a particular story about a semi-transparent cylinder floating through a room, and I thought that was so bizarre. It
I
was
love
so
these stories.
alien.
Yeah. I love these stories. There was a mirror I heard of one that was picked up from an antique shop, and every time this person went to sleep, he could hear a party going on, a house party.
Ooh,
And then he thought attributed it to this mirror, and his friend was like, "That's nonsense. I'm going to take it home." And woke up to hear a big house party going on, and he eventually went back to the shop, and the owner just laughed and said, "Yeah, that's a thing." Um, we had that story of one this year, didn't we? Of the painting that was in the charity shop that kept being brought back to the charity shop because there was activity occurring.
right. Yes, there's quite a few cursed or haunted paintings going around.
Mm,
I think a
yeah.
lot of them, if you go back far enough, are probably inspired by M.R. James type stories.
Yes. Yeah.
There's one of an etching, I think it is, where there's a figure in the
Who
it's
keeps
the etching
going in
that
different positions, doesn't he? And
yeah.
aging and yeah.
There's a story I read in a book called Strangely Enough, which is essentially paraphrased of that story, but presented as true. It's about a painting of a castle, and at the top of the castle there's a window, and the guy who buys it sees that the window's lit, and he's telling everyone about this painting. And then the next day, the window's no longer lit. Ooh.
Yeah.
Supposedly, it depicts every 100 years the light will come on as an
Right.
anniversary to some horrible event that happened, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's,
Yeah.
it's essentially a pastiche of this ML James story, but presented as true.
Right. I like that. I did a night with a painting called The Anguished Man. I don't know if you've heard of
Ooh,
that one. And it
no.
is quite horrifying to look at. And there was a bit of a backstory where it was found in someone's loft and they said, no, we're not going to bring it out. And it was his grandmother. And he's like, well, I'll have it then. And he put it up and immediately poltergeist activity started. And then they tried to research where this painting came from. But it was bizarre. And although I'm a paranormal investigator, I'm very skeptical and
Yeah.
but they had this painting and they were doing a circle and they said, they're asking it questions and the easel started rising up from left and right.
Ooh.
And they said, would you like to go near the painting? And I was like, yes, I do, because I'm just going to lightly touch it. So there's no pressure that can make it move. And if you put pressure on my hand, I'm going to know as well. And it still did it. So
Mm.
I was like, what's going on here? And then at one point they said, right, we're going upstairs. Do you want anyone to stay with you? And this easel shuffled towards me and faced me. And then later at night, they were kind of walking around somewhere else, and I sneaked back in the room, checked this easel. I was like, "Where's the electrics?" And yeah, I couldn't find anything. I still think there will be a trick to it,
Yeah.
but this painting is definitely creepy. It's
Mm.
yeah,
That's a good
good.
one. I've just got this strange light reflecting on my face, and I don't know where it's coming from at the moment.
Yeah, a little bar.
Um,
It's
sorry.
the UFO.
Oh, there we go. Yeah, that's a good one. What
Hmm.
is the most profound encounter you've had?
Oh, well, I grew up when I first moved from down south to Brompton, I grew up in a very, very haunted house, and it was terrifying. It wasn't nice, it wasn't pleasant, and that's what kind of got me into it because I was wanting to escape the fear of this
Mm,
exceptionally oppressive force and nature. But there's been some interesting ones. I think the weirdest one was there was a street and lots of negative things happened on this street where I was working throughout the week. There was fights breaking out, and a guy just once turned up wearing no shoes and trousers. He's wearing trousers but no shoes and no top, holding scissors. And
mm,
then when we kind of spoke to him, we were worried because it's by a school, and he kind of started to come round and he was like, "Well, I don't know why I'm here. what's going on? Oh, I need help. It was kind of like he was suddenly back in the present, and all this stuff kind
Mm.
of went on, and in just 1 week. And then I was on my lunch break, and this kind of 1980s beige car drove down the road, and this woman looked straight at me, and as I'm looking at her, her eyes kind of went like that, like jet black, oval
Mm.
shaped for those that are listening, but bigger than normal eyes, and staring right at me, and it was really uncomfortable, quite scary. So that one was weird because that's not something I've ever heard before. But also, my son in this house grew up, and he sees a girl, and it's completely still, like so. It's like a photo,
Yep.
and it's aged as he's aged. He says,
Mm.
and he doesn't see anything else anywhere else. It's just this house, to the point where he's autistic, and he's just very honest. And I was like, Charlie, you need to stop running. And he said, I can't because I'm too scared. And he, even now, he's 20, he still like runs through the up the stairs because he doesn't want to look at this girl.
Mm.
Quite a few. I've yeah, quite a few experiences. What about yourself? Have you had any?
Um, Mostly with me, it's sleep paralysis type stuff.
Okay,
And I would say most of it happened when I started researching the UFO book, and
right.
then it's continued ever since.
Oh dear.
It does make me think, did the UFO book inspire it, or was it something I always had and I was just able to put a name to it?
Right.
Yeah. So usually it's, you wake up in the middle of the night, you have a weight on your chest,
Yeah.
and one would see a shadowy figure. And then you wait long enough, it will completely dissipate and you go back to sleep.
Right.
Well, the first time it happened to me, it was terrifying.
Yeah. I can
And the second
imagine.
time, it was entertaining.
Yeah.
I knew what it was, and that's how it's been ever since. I had one a few weeks ago, um, probably because I've been doing a little paranormal research. I've been reading a book about ancient Greek mystery cults, which is good fun. But yeah, I've seen all sorts, sleep paralysis, but I have a totally skeptic's hat, firmly on my head
Yeah.
comes to that. Otherwise, I've seen strange lights on Ilkley Moor,
All right.
uh,
Yeah.
where there was allegedly a UFO in the 80s, but that's a strange story. And yeah, I've
Where the
seen,
ducks fly backwards, of course.
oh, what, sorry? Oh, the ducks.
Yeah. Yeah. Have you heard of that? The song?
No, no.
It'll come all by tat, and then where the ducks fly
Oh,
backwards. Yeah.
yes,
I don't know where
yes.
that comes from.
And the worms will eat you up. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. It's a song, and it's just about the importance of headwear when it's cold outside.
There's always lessons.
It's a parabolic song.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, that's about it. I've seen things in the corner of my vision on occasion, but I think most people have seen something like that,
Mm.
you know.
Yeah.
And then you wonder if your memory is adding to it over time.
Yeah. And we do get just changes in blood flow and things in the corner of our eye sometimes that
Yeah,
can create that. And then you fill in the blanks and all sorts. So,
yeah,
yeah. It's just interesting that when people see something out the corner of their eye, then someone else sees something out the corner of their eye and it's exactly the same description.
yep,
That's always interesting.
yep.
What would you like to see? What if you had a chance? What's the thing like you would really like to experience?
A full apparition,
Yeah.
not a partial apparition. The partial apparition I saw was a hand behind a tree.
Right.
When I got to the tree, there was no one there. And, with a skeptic hat firmly on, I've always said, oh, it must have been a leaf falling.
Yeah.
I can easily dismiss it, even though at the time it looked like someone's hand
Yeah.
coming from behind a tree. But, it'd be nice to see something clearly, but it's unlikely.
Yeah.
Or, seeing something move or feeling something move, that would be good.
Yeah. There was a lot of that in the house I grew up in.
Mm.
So yeah, literally things just hovering in midair, flying around, and
Mm.
it was like something out of a horror film in terms
Mm.
of just all the tropes that you would expect. Um, but yeah, that was an interesting place.
Was there a smell?
No, we didn't really get. That's one thing we didn't get. We had everything from the like the BT coming round because there was like constant calls taking place that was they said it was impossible to ring people that many times in that short space of time, but like constant of stuff like that to puddles of water suddenly appearing on the floor, swarms of flies suddenly appearing in the house, people coming in seeing different apparitions. As I say, things like levitating. One of the weirdest things was it only happened if you're on your own in the house. I think it was trying to scare you, and it was someone running really fast across the top floor.
Mm,
Um, but as if it was running through walls. And when I say like it was loud, it was like whoever was running was stamping their feet as hard as they could as they ran.
yeah.
And that was obviously terrifying. And just to loads of bad luck, like
Mm,
so much bad luck that it becomes beyond a coincidence. And
yeah.
even my parents behaving completely different in that house to out the house.
Yeah.
History of suicides, like different owners, like one after another. So
Mm.
yeah, it was a dark old place, that one.
Yeah, it does remind me of the 70s drama Stone Tape, and it's a common um well, trope is a strong word, but it's a common theme in
Yeah,
haunting that you have a re a repeating number of things happening in the same place over
yeah, yeah,
decades or even centuries.
yeah. It is really interesting. I worked in a building which was a lot lighter. It was more trickster,
Yep.
and that had activity and would do things on command as well.
Mm.
And I tracked down workers from, you know, 30, 40 years before who would say that it also happened and they also enjoyed it and it's really yeah. And then you get some that are just attached to people as well.
Yep.
I just love that it never ends.
Mm.
The learning and the ideas that what can come with that.
Yeah. Spooky.
Yeah. So I've taken up more than an hour of your time.
That's all right.
So thank you so much for coming on the show. Where can people get the books?
Where are my books? I think the best place to get my books is a bookstore near you, a bookshop. If you go to an independent bookshop, ask them to order it in, they'll love you for it. You know, support
Excellent.
your local businesses.
Definitely.
If you can't do that, they are available online and your regular high street bookshops like Waterstones. The publisher's website is let me check. It is Flying Eye, as in a flying eye, flyingeyebooks.com.
Excellent. I'll put those in the link as well in the show notes, and as well as your site, Adam. And are you doing any signings or anything coming up?
Yes, I'm doing a signing at OK Comics in Leeds in November. It will be on the 14th of
14th of
November.
November.
And
Fantastic.
then I'm going to be at Thought Bubble, which is like the major comic convention in the UK in Harrogate on the 16th and 17th.
Fantastic.
Harrogate, the location of the mystery disappearance of Agatha Christie.
Yes, I was doing a lecture in ADHD and I was delivering an ADHD lecture in that very hotel.
Oh,
So that
yeah,
was
it's an interesting
interesting.
story. I think she just wanted a break.
Yeah, it seems that way, doesn't it? She was just like
Yeah.
wanted a break, found a load of jazz musicians to hang out with, and the rest is history.
Yep.
Well, thank you so much for coming on the show, Adam. And yeah, good luck with the new book. I hope it sells really well. They really are, and I'm not just saying it because you're on the show. They're really beautiful books for any age, and I commend them to everyone listening.
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure to be on.
Thank you.